So I have finally been able to do 1 trillion in damage to a world boss in King's Raid. I did that on world boss number 1, Mountain Fortress. I've reached as high as 1.2 trillion, but that one I didn't record. But I did record a run in which I surpassed 1 trillion. These are the characters I was using. I'm using Shia, the healer. Shia is, right now, the only character for which I have a 5-star unique weapon. I'm also using some Dark Legion gear on her. You'll notice that I have Dark Legion gear on a lot of the characters now. What Dark Legion gear does is it increases the critical damage of all your characters. So it's a good thing to use on auxiliary characters like tanks and healers. I would probably be using even more Dark Legion gear, but the thing is, although I had a lot of magic powder, as I was farming Dark Legion gear, I ended up running out of magic powder, and I had to farm dragon raids to get magic powder, and that actually takes a long time. Although now there is actually an event that allows you to get a lot more magic powder. But for a little while, I really didn't have enough magic powder to use as much Dark Legion gear as I wanted. I'm also using Annette. Annette is a mechanic that is also a healer that can give your whole team more CC resist and remove negative effects. Some people have successfully been using Fallen Frey instead of Annette for her CC resist skills, but I haven't really gotten Fallen Frey to work as well as Annette. I know that Fallen Frey requires a lot of mana and requires mana to be full as much as possible for her CC resist effects, but I'm not really sure how much mana recovery per attack or mana recovery per second I need for Fallen Frey. So I'm using Annette for now. I'm also using Audi, a character who is really good at reducing the cooldowns of the other characters. And I also give Audi a very high amount of mana recovery per attack, over 100%. That way, each time he attacks, he actually gains mana. That's useful because his S3, the one that actually reduces cooldowns, costs a lot of mana. I'm also using Esker as one of my support characters. This is a character that I've newly added. His S3 is well known for its ability to either increase the amount of damage it does by 30% or decrease its cooldown by 2 seconds. And there's a 50% chance of either one happening. Eventually, his cooldown will go all the way down to 2. So you can just use his S3 several times in a row, and it will have more of an effect later on in the battle. I don't really recommend Esker for someone who is brand new to the game, but if you've already been using this game for a long time, he is pretty useful in long battles like world boss battles. I'm also using Rahartna as a healer. She's one of my favorite healers. As you can see, I've actually got a 4-star unique weapon for her. The thing about Rahartna is, in a way, she's a lot like Mei, but she's not an NPC character, so it's a lot easier to get her unique weapons. I'm also using Lavril. Lavril is technically a healer, but what she really does is she augments the main DPS character, and it's a good idea to give her as much critical damage as possible. That's why I'm using Lava Gear on her, because her S2 will transfer half of that critical damage to the main DPS character. And my main DPS character is Laudia. As you can see, I have a 4-star unique weapon for Laudia. I also have her soul weapon. I'm also using one of the Shakma artifacts on her to greatly increase the amount of damage she does. And I can use that artifact in part because this world boss does not dispel positive effects. For a tank, I am using Excelsia. Before, I was using Mora, who isn't a bad tank, but Excelsia is something of an anti-physical tank and pro-magic tank. She's very good at protecting against physical damage and also at amping magical users. Her magic amp does have a lot to do with her unique weapon. I only have a 2-star unique weapon, but since this world boss deals primarily physical damage and is more sensitive to magical damage, I am using Excelsia. So without further ado, let's get into the battle. So in this battle, I coordinate using the main DPS Ladia with Audi as much as possible. That way I can use her S3 as much as I can. So when I start out, I usually use Audi's S1 or S2. That way I get more mana because I give him over 100% mana recovery per attack. And that will give me enough mana to use his S3, but first I end up using Ladia's S3 a few times before I can use Audi's S3. This world boss's attacks get stronger and stronger as the battle goes on, but I also will end up doing more damage towards the latter part of the battle, and that's in part because I'm using Esker and his S3 gets stronger and stronger and its cooldown gets lower and lower. But part of the challenge is to stay alive for as long as possible so that you can continue to do damage. I'm using Shia on auto, but I am actually doing some manual overrides of Shia. A lot of people like to use Shia fully manually, but since I have 3 other characters that I'm using fully manually, I decided to use Shia on auto. So at the 4.5 minute mark, about 1 minute into the battle, we reach approximately 100 billion, which is pretty good, although more of the damage will come later in the battle. As you can see, I mostly stick to using Ladia's S3, but I do use her S2 sometimes. I also have her A0 soul weapon. Actually, all of the soul weapons that I have for all the characters I'm using are A0. The only character I have an A1 soul weapon for is Kara, but I'm not using Kara in this battle. Okay, so that time he did push us back with his blast, which is usually a sign that my CC resist isn't quite high enough, but the good news is he doesn't do that too many times. Also, that time at least, none of my characters were killed. Also, I'm using Acelsia's UT4. I was actually using another one of her unique treasures at first, but this particular treasure, UT4, seems to be the most helpful in this battle. So at 2 minutes into the battle, with 3.5 minutes left, I just surpassed the 275 billion mark. That's not bad, but it's still a long way from a trillion. As you can see, he's stunned right now, and when he's stunned is when you can do the most damage to him. He, along with Protanius, do get stunned. World boss number 3 never really gets stunned. So this time it does look like he's going to push us back a little bit. But that time we were able to regroup pretty fast, so I guess it's not too bad. So I get to the 400 billion mark right around 3 minutes, with 3 minutes left. And at this point, you can see that Esker's S3 only has a 2-second cooldown. Once it reaches a 2-second cooldown, you can use it much faster. It doesn't get any less than 2 seconds. I believe it still continues to get more powerful, if I'm not mistaken. And as you can see, at the 2.5 minute mark, we get to right around 500 billion in damage, or halfway to a trillion. We also did that 100 trillion in just 30 seconds, so the rate of damage we're doing is increasing. His S3 increases the overall amount of damage that the target takes. Incidentally, I'm also using his UT3, which further increases the amount of damage that the target takes, although I have a 0-star UT3. I'm also using his S3 light perk, which says that the damage increase effect will activate after the cooldown reduction effect activates at max stat first. So that also basically increases the amount of damage that his S3 contributes to towards the end of the battle. I believe I forgot to mention those two things earlier. Anyway, at 1 minute and 45 seconds, we reach right about 750 billion in damage. So we will make it to the 1 trillion point, but the thing I'm thinking right now is I just hope I can survive long enough to do that. And now with 1.5 minutes left, we are past the 800 billion mark. So we're getting there. But like I said, this world boss does do more and more damage as time goes on. It looks like he's getting ready to blast us again. But this time, it looks like we were not actually thrown back. So that's a pretty good sign. And it looks like we stunned him again, and we are just about to surpass the 900 billion mark right before it says there's 1 minute left. So we're almost there to the 1 trillion. Just a few more seconds now. We're about past 975 billion. And we just need to go a little bit farther. And it looks like right at the 37-second mark is when we reach 1 trillion. And right about then, he also kills, it looks like at least 4 of my characters. But that's okay, because we did actually get to the 1 trillion mark, finally. And it even looks like about 3 of my characters are still alive. So I'll take it. Finally reached 1 trillion on a world boss battle. This is not the first time, but it is the first time that I recorded the entire battle. So there you go. Let me know what you think of the comments, and if you have any suggestions on how I can improve, those are welcome as well. Very special thank you to my Patreon producers, Jamie Joy and Lena, aka Lollipop. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon for notifications, and select all notifications. It really helps me out when you select all notifications. You can also catch me on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter at Zorkbid123.